The Ministry of Culture of the Czech Republic and the municipality of Třebíč present Written in Stone. This wild yet alluring landscape on the edge of the Czech Moravian highlands first appears on the map of European history in the early 12th century. Ora et labora, work and pray. This was the watchword that started calling more and more men to a life of asceticism, toil and learning. For it was a Christian monastic order, the black-robed Benedictines, who first settled here and for centuries to come set the pace and rhythm of life and of time itself. Now home to 40,000 people and the administrative centre of this southwestern tip of Moravia, the town was built in the High Gothic style and was probably founded by the Benedictine abbot Martin, who in 1277 had a document drawn up to commemorate the event. It tells us that the building was sponsored by a burgher named Hermann, but leaves many questions unanswered. Třebíč acquired the legal status of a town around the year 1335. The seals are those of the Moravian Margrave Karel and his father John of Luxembourg. Apart from the town's fortified ramparts, another typical medieval feature is the high tower that was later incorporated into the originally Gothic St. Martin's Church. Over the years, the fortified medieval settlement was ravaged by fire and war, and most catastrophically in 1468 during the Czech-Hungarian Wars, when the Benedictine monks were driven out of their monastery and eventually from the entire region. But the seeds of their industry continued to bear fruit. The secular rule of the nobility was no less strict. Crafts and trades flourished, learning became widespread and tastes more refined. Scholars and clerics challenged the empty materialism of the rich. The Renaissance had arrived and was to spend nearly 2 centuries within these walls. Třebíč survived even the 30 Years' War without sustaining major damage, thanks to the diplomatic skill of its ruler, Count Karel the Elder of Žerotín. Although situated right beside the castle, the basilica, and the settlement of retainers and traders established below them, the town retained its autonomy. A natural boundary between the two communities was formed by the river Jihlava and the town wall, in those days still intact, with its 3 gates, the Brno, Jihlava and Vienna gates. The Baroque makes only a rather coy appearance in this predominantly Gothic and Renaissance town, in church architecture and ornamentation. The building of the basilica was commenced in the first part of the 13th century by Benedictine monks. Teams of masons were assembled from as far away as southwestern France and the Rhineland, where many fine Romanesque buildings attested to their remarkable skill. The masons were as good as their reputation. Their richly inventive work reinterpreted the exhortation Benedicte omnia opera Domini Deo, praise unto the Lord all the works of the Lord, to express not only the idea of Christian humility, but also the name of the founder of the order, St. Benedict. And on one of the two pillars on either side of the porch, we can also find this relief sculpture thought to be of Kuno, abbot of Třebíč. The sculptures in the 6 vaults over the entrance illustrate 6 verses of the 3rd chapter of the book of Daniel. A relief above the entrance into the basilica from the cloisters depicts the church victorious over the powers of hell. The crypt below the eastern choir forms a massive vaulted system of 50 pillars and semi-pillars with fine sculptural decorations. The stonemasons' marks on the massive ashlars, cut from local granite, tell their own simple stories. In the eastern part of the choir, the presbytery, we can find virtually every feature of European ecclesiastical architecture of the 12th and 13th centuries, but above all, those of the German Rhenish style. Between 2 later Gothic windows, there's one original Romanesque one. The external gallery above the presbytery is known as the Dwarf Gallery. In the central section of the choir, the intricately decorated portal draws our attention to the entrance to the surprisingly colourful Abbot's Chapel. The wealth of sculpture, the frescoes, as well as the architectural form of the space all share in the same aim: to create beauty, which in the pre-Gothic period had come to be considered one of the attributes of sanctity. If beauty is indeed divine, then the works of man, humbly striving for beauty and hallowed by sincere and profound meditation, may also aspire to the eternal, regardless of which period of human history the work originates in. Perhaps this is why the basilica's rare symbiosis of Romanesque and Gothic styles is easily able to accommodate the alterations carried out 300 years later in the Baroque Gothic style by František Maximilian Kaňka. Benedicte omnia opera Domini Domino. One of God's works, self-evidently, is man himself, whether within or without the monastery walls. Perhaps due to the monks' humility and tolerant acceptance of all men as God's creatures, a thriving community of artisans and merchants, most of them Jewish, grew up around the monastery. Hard times were to come. Wars, fires, and periods of persecution. But in the end, tolerance always prevailed. The Jewish community expanded, and something approaching a Jewish town began to emerge. Despite occasional disputes, usually of an economic nature, the two communities, Christian and Jewish, managed to coexist in peace, each with its own divine authority. But not even the thriving Jewish community of Třebíč could survive a Holocaust on an international scale. All that remains are mementos, recollections, and cultural artifacts, now in the care of the Jewish Museum in Prague. And the ghetto itself, a place without plan or pattern, quaint and intriguing, and a uniquely well-preserved memorial of Jewish culture in Central Europe. After half a century of neglect, the town is now coming back to life. It owes this new lease of life, above all, to men and women for whom the Christian values of humility and tolerance still have some meaning. The cemetery, on a hill behind the town, probably dates from the 15th century. Before that, it had been customary for Jews to be buried near the monastery walls. The change of site was no doubt prompted by a change of landlord, What was acceptable to the monks was frowned on by the gentry who replaced them.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kaneinu Vaneinu, Ki Ein Banu Ma'asi, Asei Imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, Asei Imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, V'hoshienu, Asei Imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, Asei Imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, V'hoshienu.
11,000 graves with 3,000 tombstones cover an area of nearly 12,000 square meters, making this one of the largest cemeteries in the Czech Republic. The ceremony hall was built in 1903. In a town whose history goes back over 700 years, the pace and rhythm of life cannot fail to be influenced, if only subconsciously, by the constant presence of the past. Every stone has a story to tell. The artistic quality of this legacy sets the standard for new generations. Which is why Třebíč can also boast works by important architects of modern times, such as Josef Gottschar and Bohuslav Fuchs. Today, the local authority, working hand in hand with conservation experts, is systematically renovating the historic town centre, which in the 1920s was expanded to include the Jewish quarter, the castle and the basilica. Their aim is to foster an awareness of tradition, of the unbroken, intertwined threads of art and history that can be seen above all in the context of architecture. Long ago, this wild yet alluring land welcomed the first human settlers and inspired them to build. Not only historic urban centres, such as Třebíč, but individual buildings of great sophistication. It inspired men to be productive and creative, and to meditate on faith and virtue. And still, it continues to be enriched by the works of man.